Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon. So everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay. To esteemed researchers, academicians, librarians, postgraduate students, a very warm welcome from UNIMEP Library to all of you. We are so glad to have you join us for today's webinar titled Learning from Springer Nature Global Transformative Agreement and Open Science Landscape. For everyone's information, this program is designed in conjunction with International Open Access Week 2025. A big thank you to all our participants today, our respected academic staff, librarians, and students. On behalf of UNIMED Library, we truly appreciate your time and interest in today's topic. For everyone's information, let me share a little bit about Open Access Week. Open Access Week is an opportunity for the academic and research community to continue to learn about the potential benefits of open access, to share what they've learned with colleagues, and to help inspire wider participants in helping to make open access a new norm in scholarship and research. This session aims to provide valuable insights into the evolving open science environment and the transformative publishing models shaping global research communication. Participants will have the opportunity to learn directly from Springer Nature expert about pathways to enhance research visibility, accessibility, and impact through open access initiative. So before we proceed with the webinar, allow me to share a little bit about our speakers today. Our speaker today, Caroline Nevison. Caroline Nevison is the director of OA agreements at Springer Nature. She has worked with the global library community for 19 years, originally through the transition from print to digital, and now in the open access transition. Caroline works with libraries and consortia in all parts of the world, seeking sustainable pathways to use OA agreements to drive uptake and impact of OA. Her team collaborates with sales, publishing, marketing, and operational teams throughout Springer Nature to enhance our agreements, ensuring they provide maximum impact and a wealth of benefits to authors, libraries, and institutions. So we are truly honored to have her with us today to share her insight on how transformative agreements are shaping the future of scholarly publishing and open science globally. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Ms. Caroline Davison to deliver her presentation on learning from Springer Nature Global Transformative Agreement and Open Science Landscape. So Ms. Caroline, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, sir, for the introduction, and thank you to everybody here today who has taken the time to attend the webinar. I really appreciate your time and hope you're having a good afternoon so far. As per the introduction, you've heard a little bit about my background and how I work with different organizations around the world, but also a lot with our internal teams regarding open access agreements. So in terms of the topics that I hope to plan to cover today, I'm going to start off with a brief introduction to why we care about open science and open access. Why does it matter? And then I'm going to talk about the role of transformative agreements in the move towards open science and open access. In doing that, I will provide a couple of global case studies of transformative agreements that we have had over the last few years, which I hope you will find interesting. And finally, I will close regarding some other kind of essential topics that we believe are really crucial to an open future. We will have time at the end for a question and answer session. So please, at that time, you'll be invited to raise your hand or to put a message, a question in the chat. So if you think of anything as we go, please do not hesitate. So to start off with open science and open access, why it matters. Hopefully, because you have this interest and you're attending this webinar, some of what I'm saying will not be new information and might be something that you're already passionate about. But I think it's useful to just set the scene about open science. So at Springer Nature, we do believe that solving the world's greatest challenges does depend on open science. And ultimately, in the end, we need to ensure that all aspects of research are open to all. So not just articles or books themselves, but data, code, protocols. And, you know, the main reasons behind this are regarding the increase of use and reuse, which ultimately will speed up scientific advances and deliver efficiencies. We also note how open access and open science can help foster collaboration between disciplines and ultimately be able to link especially interdisciplinary research together. So we need to ensure that science can work faster, be more equitable. We need to make sure that research integrity is protected, and I'll talk a bit about that at the end. And then ultimately, although you know it sounds like an extreme goal, but ultimately open science will support the ability to solve the world's greatest challenges. So without it, we won't be able to make that progress. And a bit more detail on why that is. So, you know, we know that open science is the future. There's no point in sort of looking backwards. But let's see what it can do for us. What can it do for the research system itself, for researchers, institutions and funders, but also what can it do beyond academia? So at the kind of basic level, as I'm sure you know well, it can increase or is proven to increase downloads of articles, citations of articles. We know that it enables reproducibility and thereby increasing trust in research. It helps to improve those collaborations and that interdisciplinary research that I've just talked about. But we also see how it does support the real world application of research. And I think over the last few years, there have been many, many examples of that, of how research is working in the real world. And of course, by doing that, there has to be increased attention to the research itself through media and social media. For a country or for an institution that has startups as part of it, we know that it does boost economic growth. And of course, we need to ensure, because it's most often publicly funded research, that is accessible to all and not just to academia, because that is what is needed to democratize the access to research outcomes within a country and around the world. So looking at some of those statistics, I will talk about some country specific mentions, but each year Springer Nature does produce an open access report. And so you'll be able to track on an annual basis what statistics we are seeing across our hundreds of thousands of articles. And we always make as much data available as possible so that you can see the numbers behind these grand statements that you'll often see mentioned. So we do have that ongoing proof regarding increased citations, increased downloads, and also altmetric attention. So for those not familiar, that's mentions in the media, in social media, and ultimately potentially in policy. One aspect that we find that sort of is at the core of our mission, but is heavily linked to open access, is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And increasingly we do, I'm very pleased to say, we do see more and more of the articles that we publish that relate to the SDGs being published open access. So why and how do we think we need to support that future in terms of kind of more practical steps of working with libraries and working with researchers? So there's kind of 4 pillars to it. We believe that focusing on gold OA is the only sustainable path to an open future. We do invest heavily in our fully OA portfolio, and by that also means the systems behind it and the research solutions. We also need to make sure that we're constantly innovating to assure equity in OA. And the last pillar, which is what I spend most of the time on today, because that is my core area of expertise, is how we transition our hybrid portfolio via transformative agreements. So some of you will be familiar with transformative agreements, others might not. So I'll start with a brief explanation of what that means and what is the role of a transformative agreement. So it is a type of open access agreement with either an institution or a consortia, a group of institutions that combines publishing in hybrid journals with access to subscription content. So whilst we are on this transition towards open access, there is still a mixture of content which is behind a paywall, open only to those that subscribe, and content that is moving open access, so therefore is available to all. And in each institution or each country, there'll be a portion of articles that are being published subscription, and that the goal would be to move them towards being published open access. So by combining the open access publishing and the access into one single agreement, that can ultimately provide a pathway for a full transition and a rapid transition for hybrid journals to move towards open access, and also change the way that that is funded by using existing institutional funds to move towards publishing, and thereby removing the APC costs for an individual researcher. So we have been working on these agreements for 10 years now. It's actually our kind of 10-year anniversary this year since the first agreement in the Netherlands in 2015. And again, for those of you familiar, you'll see many kind of pictures like that as both Springer Nature and other publishers like Springer Nature do gradually move into an open access future with many countries. So going back to that 10 years ago, a lot of the original agreements were in Europe. And a lot of that was driven by funder mandates to move to immediate open access. So when funders started to have these mandates and quite short timescales to achieve those mandates, that is when we started working with our existing library consortia to make that transformation. However, it really wasn't long before the movement did start to spread, beyond into Eastern Europe, into the Middle East. And in the last, I'd say 3 to 4 years, there has been a great movement in both the Americas and in Asia. Australia and New Zealand were probably kind of one of the early movers there. But even just last year, a lot of our agreements signed were in Asia Pacific, the new agreements. So in South Korea, burgeoning agreement in Japan, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and our first agreement in Thailand in 24. Now, of course, I don't mention Malaysia here just because we tend to report on full year results. So a lot of the reports that Springer Nature does will be looking at full year 2024. However, we're of course delighted that we do now have a transformative agreement with Concept in Malaysia. So, as I mentioned, it's not just Springer Nature entering into these agreements. There are many publishers, both large and small, around the world that are working either at consortial level or with individual institutions. And the ultimate result of that is that more and more content is going open access. So I hope that those of you are also benefiting from that, are finding that more and more reliable, peer-reviewed content is actually available to you, even if you may not have subscriptions with that publisher, because ultimately that is the goal. And that is why these agreements can provide the fastest and the most sort of efficient route to doing that at scale. My next slide also has lots of small writing on it, so don't worry if you can't read it. We can also provide links to some of our reports at the end of this presentation. But what we try to show here is all the different countries that have made a transformative agreement with us. And we show in the dark purple bar, the first bar in each country, what was the level of open access take up before the agreement started. And then in the lighter purple, the level of open access take up after the agreement had been in place. So in this case, in 2024. So we'll see, obviously, at the top end, we see some countries at the 95% uptake, a lot in the kind of 60 to 80%. And that will, of course, depend on how many institutions are part of the agreement, whether it's the whole country or not, how long the agreement might have been in place for. And we also have countries such as the US, where there will never be a national agreement. You know, there is not such thing as an organization that looks after agreements for the whole country. So there we're working with smaller regional consortia. So that bar will continue to jump up, but not, a big jump to the 100% level. So if you have any questions about, these individual countries, we're more than happy to try and answer them. But I think it shows how the model can work for different types of countries and different types of institutions. I'm going to jump a little bit to the practical here of what does the publishing workflow look like for a researcher or for a library who is part of an agreement. So in terms of the basic workflow for authors, what I would like to say is that the agreement part of this is just one part of the usual process. So we make sure that an author does not need to go outside their usual system of submission and peer review, etc., in order to take account of an agreement. So an article, if after you submit and go through peer review, if your article is accepted in a hybrid journal, then your corresponding author would be providing identification parameters, and at that point they might be identified as eligible as part of the agreement. Of course, that depends on the appropriate institution being part of an agreement. It needs to ensure that it's a journal that is covered by the agreement. Our agreements in general will cover all Springer hybrid journals. But those checks still have to happen to make sure that everything is in order. And then at that point, you would be told, yes, you're eligible under this agreement, and this is covered by the institution. And so you can choose to publish open access through the agreement. This gets confirmed and nothing is slowed down. So the article, the production happens on the same time scale, and it's really important that obviously we're speeding up the process. We're not doing anything to slow things down. And for the library, or whoever in the institution is managing the agreement, we also try to make that as smooth as possible. So the library or the consortia, depending on the kind of level of control over the agreement, will receive a notification that an article has come through as eligible under the agreement, and they can. We hope that they approve them. They might have certain things that they want to check to make sure that an author is kind of still was employed by them at the time of the research. But ultimately, majority of articles are getting approved there. And then once an institution has an agreement, the great thing is, and you'll see from some of my next slides, that we're able to do much more enhanced reporting about those articles, about where they're being used, and various data about downloads of those articles. So, that's one of the really exciting things, that we can start to more clearly see the impact of publishing open access by having the agreements go through, the articles go through a system. My next slide, I won't pause too long on it, but I just wanted to highlight the kind of feedback that we receive both from institutions and from researchers themselves. What is it that they find important in these agreements? Why do they choose to take part or not take part in an agreement such as this? So one quotation here from the person that for many years managed the agreement in Australia, comments on obviously making a large amount of articles immediately available to a global audience, and they comment on the breadth of the titles included, because of course they span all subject areas. The researcher in the middle, also from Australia, extremely passionate about how open access is essential for some of the big topics of our time, such as climate action, gender justice, and peace advocacy. And a researcher or director of research in India, commenting on the ability to sort of enhance research ability, and again producing a societal impact. So these are the kind of messages that we do hear again and again about why it is so important to move at scale towards open access. So I mentioned that I'm going to cover a couple of case studies, and so I am going to cover some information from Switzerland and some from Hong Kong. The reason for those is that we are working on the kind of reporting and impact data that we can provide externally, but we have actual teams of people working on this, so we're not able to kind of just do every country automatically, but these are a couple that we have been working on. And of course, we hope to be able to show similar data for Malaysia in a year or two, once the agreement that we have has been in place for at least a year. So these case studies also show different sizes of agreements. So the agreement that we have in Switzerland is a national agreement, and it has been in place since 2020. So it's got 62 institutions. The institutions have reading access to all our Springer portfolio, and they can publish OA in all the hybrid journals, again in the Springer portfolio. So in terms of scale, since between July 2020 and March 24, which is just when we pulled this data, over 5,000 articles were published under the TA. So what kind of things do we tend to find when we look at this at a country level? We can look at the top disciplines, and often these do come out the same just because of the strength of the Springer portfolio in these areas. So we will tend to see medical and life sciences coming up top. However, when we look at the growth disciplines, so the growth of material being published open access, here we tend to see a different story. Because these can be areas where obviously funding is more challenging, and historically there has been less funding in these areas to make material open access. So here we tend to see quite a big uptake in humanities and social sciences, or in some of the more applied sciences, which is really exciting to see, and something that we hoped would be the advantage of these kind of agreements. Again, you see a similar story on the next slide. So this is what we talked about a few moments ago in terms of the level of OA uptake in the country as a whole, and we see how this has jumped over the years. And then this on the right-hand side is the breakdown into subject disciplines, so humanities and social sciences, maths, physical and applied sciences, and medical and life sciences. So here we really see how that breadth of portfolio is enabling a much more level playing field across the disciplines, and not just advantaging those subject areas which have always been better funded, both at a national and global level. Then, so this is kind of what's happening with the research in terms of it being openly available, but where is it getting used? So this is something that we're able to look at as well. So this is all the articles that have been published under this agreement. Where are they being used? And I guess the first observation is that they are being used all around the world in every continent, including Antarctica. But what we also tend to see is great growth of use of that content in places including South America, Africa, and parts of Asia. So this is a kind of direct proof that the content is being accessed by audiences who are doing research that would not have normally had access. And the next slide kind of is the same point really. What we see is that 30% of the usage is coming from users who we recognize on our system, so they probably have a subscription to some content already. But 70% is coming from users who we're not recognizing on our system. That means it's reaching a far broader audience by being open access, and reaching those who wouldn't normally have access through subscriptions. One of my final points is around that. Excuse me, I'm just going to have some water. Is around the increase in downloads that open access articles tend to have. And I think it's very easy for us to provide these big figures in our reports and say, you know, you see 2, 3, 4 times more downloads. But what we're trying to do is look at this on a much more granular level. So we're looking at it by country, by institution, and we're seeing that same kind of impact however we look. So that's really important that we have the proof and the evidence behind that. So what this shows is that if you compare OA publication downloads with subscription downloads in the same period of time for articles coming out of the same country and same institutions, we see a 4-time increase in the number of downloads of OA papers. Finally, we talked about how the transformative agreements do combine a reading access with open access. And whilst, as I say, we are in this transition, that's really important still, because there does remain content that around the world is not yet transitioning to open access. But we want to ensure that more and more people are still having access to this content. So we tend to provide a big uplift in what institutions can access when they're taking part in an agreement, and we see that impact when we look at the usage. So this is showing that in Switzerland before the agreement, the downloads were high, but then just made a huge jump up once the agreement went into place. So that's the Swiss example. I did talk about Hong Kong as well. I'm going to go much more quickly through these slides, but just to show you that we do see the same kind of results in many countries that we look. So our agreement in Hong Kong started just last year. It is with the 8 core academic institutions in Hong Kong. They have similar access and ability to publish OA. The articles are slightly lower in number than in Switzerland, and obviously the agreement has been in place for less time. However, we see similar results. We see a dramatic jump up in open access uptake, and we see, for example, the humanities and social sciences having a similar level of uptake to medicine and life sciences. In Hong Kong, in terms of the top disciplines, actually, because of their strength in computer science and engineering, we see that coming above life sciences and biomedicine. So actually, we do start to see the regional variations in where institutions have their strengths, and I'm sure that we'll see that in Malaysia as well. This is the picture of where the content is being accessed. And here we have the greatest access coming from Asia, but again, growing in South America and Africa. And we see a similar picture here in terms of users that we're kind of recognizing on our system that might have subscription access to other content, but anonymous use, so those who would not normally have access. And finally, we also see a similar picture in terms of here we see about 3 times the impact of open access as opposed to subscription. The agreement has only been in place for a year, so I think we'll see that gap sort of increase as time goes by. And we also see the same increase in reading access. So that's it in terms of those case studies. I hope, you know, it presents, I'm not just presenting kind of the Springer Nature view here, but these are the kind of things that institutions and researchers are looking at when they're considering okay, should we be taking this this move? And also when thinking about gold open access versus other types of open access. And we're really passionate to explain why this kind of gold open access at scale can have the greatest benefit, both to individual pieces of research, but also to society. But beyond agreements, agreements is one part of the open access and open science transition. And there are other parts that are really essential to make sure that we are supporting an open future. So I think the first is about technology. It's essential that, of course, both publishers and institutions are investing to make sure that the systems are capable of supporting more and more efficiencies for researchers. So, of course, in terms of our both going from submission through to post publication, we're trying to ensure that we're using as many AI enabled processes as possible, but doing that obviously in a meaningful and conscious way, not just throwing things and hoping they'll stick. Really thinking about what is going to enhance efficiency for researchers. One thing is making sure that that submission and peer review process is as smooth as possible for all our researchers, and so really making sure that the platform that we now house all our journals on is continuously enhancing. And then the platform itself, where the viewers are, of course, accessing the research, which is Springer Nature Link. We have been doing a lot of work to bring that together on a unified platform, because we do still have, of course, we've got Springer portfolio, Nature portfolio, other fully open access portfolios, and just making sure that there is a smooth and consistent experience across them. We talked a little bit about research integrity at the start of the call. Now, I'm sure that an expert in the field could do a whole webinar on this in this topic, and indeed that is something that Springer Nature does do. But I think it's really important to explain to you how this is something that we are investing huge amounts of time and energy in to make sure that open access continues to be trusted in the way that it needs to be successful. So we do have a specialist integrity team, which was the industry's first. So we look both at preventing research fraud in the first place, but then we also look at how to tackle with it where we do see any issues. We do have training and workshops. So we have some online training available, but we also do a lot of training with our own teams and with our external academic editors. Some of you may be connected to our journals, and we need to make sure that everybody is aware of this and supporting our efforts into integrity. We've talked about AI. Of course, there are technologies here that can really help with the checking and making sure that research can be trusted. So we're making sure that that is integrated throughout the process. And we're not just working alone in this, because this is not a Springer Nature issue. This is an industry-wide issue. And so we need to make sure that we're working with other publishers as suitable to make sure that we're sharing learnings and putting in place systems to ultimately. We just have to make sure that research that we put out there can be trusted, and that science remains as trusted as it needs to be. So I'm going to end before we go into any Q&A with a quote from our CEO, and ultimately it is about us working together. So working together with institutions and researchers. So we are open to different levels of collaboration, and we also continually want to hear from you about what are your pain points in your daily work, in your research. What are the opportunities that you see in the next few years? So yeah, we look forward to continuing to engage with you. Thank you again for your time. I hope it has given you some new global insights. And now I look forward to any questions or comments. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline, for that for that informative session. Okay. Now we'll move on to the Q&A session. Participants, if anyone has any question, please feel free to ask, and maybe you can type it in the chat box, or you can use your mic. Okay. Any question from participants?
Caroline, just one question, just simple question, right? So for the transformative agreement and also open science, so what your opinion about the role of librarian in this issue? So what should we do? What should we prepare for our to meet with the open science and also open transformative agreement?
This is a great question. Thank you. I think that libraries play a really essential role in the transition. I think it is because you have this ability to bring together sort of those that are doing the research and those that are using the content. I also find that you are data experts. You know how to work with the data surrounding publications. And so that's my first advice: is get to know your publishing history, get to know the levels of publication that you have with us, with other publishers. Get to understand how much of it is being published open access and how much is being published subscription, and start to kind of understand what is happening right now. If you're already committed to an open access future, and maybe you already have a transformative agreement, think about, what does success look like? What do you want to achieve? What's most important to you, to be able to show whether an agreement was a success, or if you have any concerns. Is it about downloads? Is it about the different disciplines, and how they're being used? Or actually, you might be from an institution that doesn't publish huge amounts, but you have the increased reading access. So yeah, just take that time to talk amongst your institution and decide what are the criteria that you look at to assess success. But yeah, I love working with libraries, and I think you play an extremely important role.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks for the question.
So we got one question from the chat box. So I'll read the question. Okay, does this transformative agreement publication accept review or concept papers beside research paper? So that's the question.
Okay. Thank you for the question. We do have the goal is to support research papers, and so we do have different categories of all primary research that are covered. So I think I would need to look into the detail of the type of review or concept paper, but in general, it is the primary research only.
Okay, so hopefully Ms. Carol has answered that question. So another one question from the chat box is, may I know whether open access journals are also included in the transfer agreement? I think transformative agreement, or it is
Yeah.
limited to hybrid journals only?
Thank you. So at this point, our transformative agreements themselves are for the hybrid journals, because that is what needs to transition to open access. And that is also where institutions would normally have subscription that they can start to transform, whereas the fully open access agreements tend to be, well, the papers are already being published open access, and tend to have different funding streams. In some countries, we do have agreements that cover both, but this does require for the institution to be kind of harnessing and bringing together those funds. So at the moment in Malaysia, the agreement just covers the hybrid journals.
So thank you, Ms. Caroline. So for another question here, I think this question is for UNIMAP actually. Transformative agreement for UNIMAP is coming to the end for 2025. So will this agreement continues for 2026? So on behalf of UNIMAP, I can answer this. Yes, we are in process of to have a new agreement for 2026 transformative agreement. Hopefully, so for 2026, we will continue with transformative agreement. But we will inform our community maybe in by January or February next year. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. We hope we can continue the successful
Okay,
collaboration.
so another one more question from the chat box. How long does the reviewing process takes place before being published for this GTA Open Access Journal?
Okay, so if I understand the question correctly, I guess there's a general peer review process in all journals, which does take a different amount of time for different journals. And I think that each of our journal web pages now show a time from submission to decision. So that can take several months. But if the question is about the kind of end part of the process between accepting the article being accepted and the article being published, then it's much shorter. It's a matter of a few weeks.
Okay, thanks. So another question is there a specific number of articles that can be included in this agreement, or is it unlimited?
So I think I would probably ask also you to comment on the specifics for UNIMAP, but I would expect that the answer is it is a specific number of articles.
Yeah.
It's not an unlimited agreement.
It's a specific number of articles that can be included under this agreement.
So so for many countries who are starting their transformative agreement journey, it is not always possible to jump straight away to an unlimited scenario covering everything. The funding does still need to be available to support. So most of our agreements would start off with a fixed number of articles. Yeah.
Okay, for UNIMAP, for this year, we have a specific number of articles that can be published, or the APC for the APC, a specific number for other APC. For 2025, for UNIMEC is 20 only. Okay, so for the next year, for the 2026, so the number is, we don't have the numbers yet. So maybe by as I mentioned, maybe by January or February next year, we will know how many the specific how many APC that will offered by UNIMEC to the UNIMEC communities. Thank you. So Ms. Solan also answered the question there. Is it it is limited for the current TA, current transformative agreement with Malaysia concept?
Hi, Miss Caroline. I'd like you to share your experience handling the transformative agreement in other countries. As we can see, Signature have the transformative agreement for the across the world. So, how's your experience? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think I will start by saying it is a different experience everywhere. The one thing that has stayed at the core is kind of the basic way that the model works, and looking at existing library holdings and making sure that we're providing access to all journals and open accessibility to all journals. So we try and make every agreement as broad as possible, but ultimately each one does have its individual flexibility, and we try to make sure that something can work in every situation. One of the things that we find is that some of the early agreements, a lot of the early agreements were really done at a national level, all institutions taking part, everyone knowing that they were committed for kind of a long period of time. As we work in more in newer countries, we do see that, you know, of course, more decisions are being made at an institutional level. And we also work, as I mentioned, in countries such as the US, where you just don't have the same kind of ability to work with a big national group. So it essentially means that the conversations are much more granular and individualized. But I guess the positive is the outcome. The outcome that we see is the same in whether it's you know, small institution, large institution, whole country. We see that immediate impact. You know, the immediate that the agreement goes live, we do see this you know, move. Suddenly articles being published open access and being used wider than they would. It's a really exciting journey. With some countries, we are already in our kind of third, fourth renewal cycle. Yeah, there's never a day that is quiet without us talking to one country or another about their agreement. So it's challenging to make something work for every country, but we find it is possible.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Caroline. So is there any question from participants?
Some really good questions. Thank you for the engagement.
All right. Things that no more question right now. So so before we wrap up, maybe we have some final words from you, Caroline.
Thank you. So yeah, I think it's a really great time to be talking to you all, where you do have an agreement that is still relatively new and hopefully can continue to be renewed into the future. I hope in due course we'll be able to provide some of the type of statistics that you have seen today, and that as individuals you'll be able to start to see the impact of individual papers. I think that what lies ahead is, an opportunity for all of us, but we have to continue to make sure that we are working together, that we are collaborating to make sure that this can work into the future and go ultimately beyond just open access, but towards ensuring that data, code, protocols, all of that is as open as possible as well. So thank you for the collaboration again, and I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Okay, thank you once again, Ms. Caroline. As we come to the end of today's webinar, we'd like to extend our heartfelt thanks once again to Ms. Caroline for her time, knowledge, and sharing. And of course, thank you to all participants for joining us today. We hope you have gained new insights into open access and how transformative agreements can help strengthen research visibility and collaboration. So let's continue to support open science for a future where knowledge is shared, accessible, and impactful for all. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thank you, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum. Bye.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Mr. Ken, Ms. Solwan, Springer, and all participants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Solon.
Thank you.